All right, I want you to turn in your Bibles for just a moment, if you would, to Matthew chapter 24, which has been one of our primary passages. And I want to give my disclaimer again that I know that there are many different views. I'm not trying to press you into my view. I've studied this, I've taught this a number of times at school, here. This is not a repeat of what I've taught before at all. I'm going out doing more research, bought more books, studying, not copying my notes and all that kind of stuff from another message I gave here. But I want you to know that I recognize that eschatology is a very fluid kind of. There are a lot of differences of opinion about everything that we talk about. And I'm going to try to give you some of those views, but I'm going to land right here. Okay, I'm going to land right back, behind me here. In last week's message, we looked at two of the 9 additional precursor signs that I want to give you. Today, I'm going to probably only look at one. I start studying again, and I don't know how to stop. Maybe that's not a good thing. But the first one that we looked at last week was that Israel became a nation in May 14th, 1948. And most really good theologians or eschatological theologians consider the nation of Israel becoming a nation to be what they call the super sign. And I think it is. I think it is the one concrete sign where we know that this is what God said was going to happen. And he said it many times in the Old Testament. We looked at it, Ezekiel 37, which is about the dry bones living. And but it's a super sign that really set the stage for everything else. Israel had to be in their land before anything that happens in Revelation can actually happen. They had to be a nation, and so that took place. That was the first one that we looked at. And then the second one that we looked at was the rise of Russia as a major world power. They used to be called the Soviet Union. I think they're called Russia now, Mother Russia. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I believe that there will be, right here in this time frame, right after the Antichrist makes a covenant, there will be known what is the war of Gog and Magog. And Gog and Magog is not a place, it is they're princes. It's talking about people. We talked about that last week. I'm not going to rehearse it. And some different views put it at the midpoint. Some people put it at the end of the tribulation. Some people don't even think it's going to happen. So I think it will, and that was what we looked at. And what we saw, if you look at verse 8 in Matthew 24, is that we had already looked at 4. We looked at the false Christ in verse 5, the wars and rumors of wars in verse 6, nation rising against kingdom, against nation, and kingdom against kingdom in verse 7, and then famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. And Jesus says all of these are just the beginning. They're the birth pains of sorrows. This is just the beginning. It's just we've just opened the door here, and these other things are going to increase. All of this is going to increase in its intensity and in its magnitude and in its frequency. And that's why I think that the word here for sorrows is the word for a woman that is in childbirth. And most of the the New King James and the King James translate it as sorrows, but if you have a New American Standard, it's probably birth pangs is the way it says it. Now, I'm going to talk about something this morning and probably the next several weeks, and I want to make my point again. I've said it multiple times that I think that what is happening with the signs is that there are things that are going to happen in here during the tribulation and the great tribulation that that are going, if I can say it this way, that they cast a shadow back toward us. So that the things that happen here, the signs, are like precursors. They're like the beginning of sorrows. If, for instance, if the president came out tomorrow and said, okay, our goal is to put a man on Mars by 2030, right? You have to start now. You don't wait until 2030 and run out and hop on an airplane and take off for Mars. It takes a lot of preparation. And so the things that I'm going to talk about are I'm going to talk more about world type events that are happening right now. I'm not making anything up. I've got plenty of research. I can go out. I can validate. This is not a conspiracy theory, these things that I'm talking about. So I'm talking about things that are happening between here and here that we believe that something that's, what we're going to talk about this morning is that we believe that something that's going to happen at the midpoint of the tribulation is casting a shadow back on us. In other words, in order for that to happen, something has to be a precursor. Something has to be developed so that that event at the midpoint of the tribulation can actually happen. Now, I want you to turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Revelation chapter 13. Revelation 13 is, I think, one of the most significant chapters in the book of Revelation, because what it does is that it establishes sort of the rise of the Antichrist and him setting himself up as God in the abomination of desolation, where he sets himself up as God in the temple. And at the end of that, after that period, after he gets shot, and then after the wound is healed, he gets shot in the head apparently. It says, beginning in verse 16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one that has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, the sign the way that I want to express this sign to you is that it appears, you don't have to agree with me, it appears from these verses that at some point in time that we're going to have a unified, a one world monetary system. And so we're going to talk about that. I did get some water today. Forgive me. I don't know why my throat gets so dry. We're going to talk about a one world monetary system. Now, I want you to look at verse 16 again, because this is what happens. The Antichrist causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, everybody. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter if you're one of the elitists, if you are one of the poorest people on the planet. Everybody is going to receive a mark. They're going to be on their right hand or on their forehead. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. And the consequence of that is that if you do not receive this mark, whatever it is, this sort of invisible tattoo, this implant, this digital implant, whatever it may be, if you do not receive that mark, I certainly don't believe it's going to be a physical tattoo, that somebody's going to allow them to put some number up here on your forehead. Just don't think that's going to happen. So it's probably going to be obviously something that is invisible. But if you don't get this, it says in verse 17 that what it means is that you cannot buy anything, you cannot sell anything. In other words, this monetary system is going to be controlled in such a way that you as an individual cannot do what you want to do. And that's what we're going to talk about here this morning. David Jeremiah wrote an excellent book. I've read it, and I actually listened to some of his teachings on it on the radio when he was actually teaching it. It's a book you might want to get it. It's called the Coming Economic Armageddon. Now, this was written a good number of years ago. It was probably written, I'd say, probably 10 years ago. I'm not exactly sure. It's called The Coming Economic Armageddon, What Bible Prophecy Warns About the New Global Economy. And what he says in that, he says that much of what's related to greed, much of what is related to economics and money and finances is based, this is the way he puts it, on continued borrowing of money by governments or individuals for the purpose of living beyond their means. Now, he's absolutely correct. It's like we are buying things that we do not need with money that we do not have, right? We know that in our own government, there are plenty of people that have maxed out every credit card that they have. I remember when Brenda and I lived on South Boundary. This was probably nearly 43 years ago when we lived there. And we had a credit card, and our credit card kind of, we were poor. I mean, I just out of school, we were coming back. I come back from the seminary. I didn't make much at the architectural firm I worked at, and we bought a house, and we were just really struggling financially, and so we just would put things on our credit card, and we don't think we maxed it out, but we were spending more each month on the interest that we had to pay than we really could afford. And we vowed at that point in time, we're going to get out of this debt. We did everything we could. We were going to get out of debt. We're never going to be in debt again. And I can say that to this day, once we got out of debt, we've never owed anybody anything. We don't owe one penny to anybody. And I like not being in debt, right? And I like not, she's got me on a budget. And sometimes she says I don't stay on it, but she's got me on a budget. And we stay there. We don't borrow money on anything. We just don't borrow money. We don't have a loan somewhere. If we're going to buy something, we're going to save up and try to pay for it. I know everybody may not be able to do that, but we live in a system that encourages that, right? We live in a system where people just have credit cards. They just go out and they buy what they want. They get what they want. My sister-in-law, it's kind of funny. My sister-in-law was in Walmart yesterday, and there was a lady that was walking out with one of these big screen TVs. She had gone and bought and bought a bunch of groceries or whatever and paid for those, and then she went back and got one of the boxes and put it on her thing, was walking out, and of course the things are going out, and everybody surrounded her and they said, you can't do this, and she cussed at him and told him, the heck with you, I'm leaving. And I don't know, she kept on going out of the store. They're not allowed to touch her, and I don't know what happened. We live in a crazy culture. It's like the world. It's like the world is experiencing what I would call, this was a term that I developed. We're experiencing kind of a global financial earthquake. Or earthquakes maybe would be sort of the better term. There are many countries that are financing and administering huge entitlement programs. We do that, right? We're probably going to start paying reparations under the new administration, probably. Your money. We've just legalized 11 million illegal immigrants. I'm sure some of them were born, many of them were born here, but they've been legalized, so it means that they can receive benefits and all that kind of stuff. We've got wars, we got runaway big government spending that sink countries into a quagmire of debts, of deficits, of skyrocketing inflation. I will never forget when I was when Tim and I were in Zimbabwe. They had the highest inflation rate in the world. I mean, I've got a piece of paper that's worth, it was called, what was the name of the currency?
I don't know.
It's a Zim. It was a Zim.
Like $1 billion.
Yeah. I've got a thing at home. It's 6 million Zim. It's worthless. You couldn't buy a piece of gum with it. My favorite story is about the guy that had a wheelbarrow load of money. I mean, money. You know, there's Zims, and he loaded it up, and he went somewhere, and he left it outside. He went into the store to get something, and when he came back, the money was on the ground, and somebody had stolen the wheelbarrow.
Wow.
That's how bad it was.
That was under the Weimar Republic in Germany.
Well, I know, but this happened in Zimbabwe.
I heard that story happened in Germany.
Well, the money was worthless. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
The money was worthless. And eventually that lack of control is going to lead to some very undesirable consequences. I would actually say it's kind of like a national Ponzi scheme, right? You know what a Ponzi scheme is?
That's exactly what it is.
You know, where a guy gets the money and he's trying to stay ahead of himself and until it kind of catches up with him. It's like we're spending money. I'm going to give you some numbers that are very shocking here. I went out to the national debt clock. If you've never seen it, just type it in. I think that's what it's called, national debt clock, and it just shows you how much we owe, how much coming in. It's remarkably revealing.
We would be arrested if we did what they did.
That's right. No. They put us in jail, and so it's like we're trying to outrun ourselves because we know that the spending and the borrowing that we have is at a very increasing pace, and ultimately it's going to lead to an entire financial collapse. We don't know when. All right, if you have any degree of wisdom and common sense, it's just something that we know is going to happen, and it's like we just finally collapse. It's like the economy just finally collapses from trying to stay ahead of this increasing debt. The debt gets much more bigger than the revenue that's coming in to pay for it. So we print money, which is worthless, is what it is. So what may be worth $1 today could just almost overnight be worth 25 cents. It could easily happen that way. I know that these end time signs and events that are addressed in Scripture, and I want you to listen carefully to what I'm saying, that everything that's up here doesn't have anything to do with the United States. I don't have the United States up here. I don't have England up here. I don't have Germany up here. This has to do with the church. It has to do with Israel. It's not, these end time events are not about the United States. And the things that I'm talking about is I don't want you to think that I'm thinking about the United States, even though I can't help but think about the United States when I talk about all of this. And so these are worldwide global events that are taking place all around us every day. These are things that are happening around us. And I think that because we live in America, we know that the national debt is just outrageous. There's not a person in here that has any common sense that would say, oh, we don't have to worry about that. You know, we've got plenty of money, or we can print more money. It defies my imagination as to how bad it really is. I went back, I don't have it in the notes today, I went back to see where most of our money had been spent and how it had been spent and the way it's being spent, and it's amazing how many worthless things we as a nation are willing to spend money on. And so I think that reversing the damage may be impossible. We may have already reached a point of no return. right? I know that from a population issue and birth control and all that kind of stuff, that it appears that as a Caucasian race that we've reached a point where we will eventually be extinct. We cannot keep up. We don't have enough. What's the average birth rate for a family? 1.2, 1.3. You know, the Muslims in most places in the world, especially in Europe, they normally have 8 kids per family as an average. Some of them have multiple wives and big families, and so I don't think it would surprise anyone with the way that government is printing money and sort of handing it out in trillions. The other night when I was listening to Biden give what the amount of money that they were going to designate for COVID relief, it was like $1.9 trillion. But the problem with that is that $1.9 trillion is an illusion, because not all of that was going for COVID relief. There was the pork barrel things that were in there that were just huge, just enormous amounts of money that were being spent on just whatever somebody wanted to spend on, so that we'll vote for this. And we live in an age of entitlement and reparations that could easily be a repeat of the Great Depression that happened in the 1930s, and I think would be much worse. Be much worse than what it was in the 30s. This is interesting to me. You should appreciate this, that the United States government is the United States' largest employer, right? I work for them. Andy works for them. Dave works for them. Larry works for them. John, you work for them. How many is that in here? We got 7 or 8 families in here today, and we got 4 or 5 people that work for the United States government.
My mom, 3 uncles, me.
Right. I'm just saying they're the United States' largest employer, and somebody's got to pay for all of that. I looked up what the current national debt of the United States is on the U.S. national debt clock. This is interesting. It was almost $28 trillion. Now I'm having problems putting $28 trillion into perspective as a debt. It's in groups of 3. It's 3, and 3 more. Is that right? I think it is. A billion is 100 million, right?
Yeah, 128,000 billion.
And this doesn't.
Let me say it. Let me just say what Dave said. That's a lot of money. 128,000 billion. It's a lot. It's a lot of money, which means that it would cost every taxpayer in America, every one of us. You gave us a little tax refund kind of thing, which is probably going to go away here next year. It would cost every American that's alive and that's paying taxes $225,000 a piece. Brenda had to pay $225,000. I'd have to pay $225,000. That's only $450,000 that would need to come to my family to help pay off the national debt. That's how big it is. We've borrowed money, we've loaned money, we've printed money, we're spending money that we don't have, and the debt is so far outdistancing the revenue that comes in. The revenue that comes in on a yearly basis to the government when you turn in your taxes is $3.5 trillion a year. So that's all the money that they can bring in is the $3.5 trillion. It's just a matter of time, right? I would call it a house of cards.
That's on fire.
That's right. It's a house of cards, and it will eventually crumble. And so, listen, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me because I know that there is something that God is doing. And I trust in the sovereignty of God so much that I don't have to be afraid of what's going to take place. So no matter what kind of perspective you choose to have on all this, I think we could suffice it to say that we know that there's going to be some kind of some kind of major global financial collapse, or at least some kind of corrective measures, right? To get everything back under control. We're not the only country doing this. Right? If it was just us, well, hey, it'd be one thing. But we have every country doing this. Every country is spending money that they don't have to do things that they probably don't even need to do. And so I think I'm not a fear monger in the sense of the word. I'm not trying to teach on all this because to make you afraid and that there's not going to be any food on your table tomorrow. But I at least want to have some kind of at least what I would call honest realism, so that I can make some reasonable decisions about my family and how to prepare. Chris is a wonderful prepper. Chris and Tracy, I've learned a lot from them. And they've taught us a lot about that. We had how long ago was it, Tracy? We had a big conference here one Saturday that Chris and I taught on being prepared. And I still have those notes. And I think never in the history of man are global economies so intricately woven with one another as they are today. We're interconnected globally with everybody else in some way. So this is a subject we could address for days. There's so much information out there. It's an information overload, really. But here's what I want you to appreciate about this, about what's going to happen right here. All right? I want to say it in a certain way about what's going to happen when the Antichrist in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16 and 17, causes everybody to have a mark. There has to be some kind of technology in place for that to happen. All right? There has to be some kind of technology that allows that to actually take place, so that if you go up and you put your hand under something and they read it, it's like a barcode, and they read it and it takes it out of your account. The only way that somebody can steal from you is to cut your hand off, but I don't think anybody at Walmart would take a hand that was cut off as a, So that technology has to be in place. It's going to be the driving force as to how the monies are actually going to be handled. All that's needed, just as a point of reference, all that is needed to implement and implant what are known as digital monies into somebody's body is already in place. This is not make-believe. I'm not talking about something that's not there, that hasn't happened yet. I was reading yesterday, I went out and was doing some research yesterday on the different companies that have already developed this, and people have implanted things in their hand, in their fingers, little chips that that open their doors, close their doors at their home, lock it, unlock it. They just kind of put their hand up there, it locks it. They take their hand back, it unlocks it, whatever it is. It's just like there's so many different ways that people are using this. If you went, you don't have to go there. If you went to James chapter 5, verse 1 through 6, it's 6 verses that talk about greed, and it talks about money and how you have withheld the wages of the laborers, and you've done this and you've done that, and God says you've done this in the last days. It's about money. It's about greed. It's worth reading. In America, we have big pharma, right? We have big government. We have big financial institutions. We have huge corporations. And those are the players that control what happens with money, right? I mean, just think about it. When back in 2008 and whenever it was, and they had the big stock market, just 40% a day or whatever it was, when it dropped and everybody just lost money, and the government goes back and bails out the banks. Banks didn't lose anything. Banks didn't lose anything. You lost something. The banks didn't lose anything. They got bailed out. I'm thinking about everything that's going on with the COVID right now, and Big Pharma's making the money, right? They're controlling everything. I think I mentioned to you last week that I had read that I actually saw it. I saw a presentation of it where Elon Musk was declared to be the richest man in the world. He's only worth $189 billion. I'm trying to figure out, well, what do you do when you get up in the morning? If you have $189 billion worth of net worth in your life. And then we have manufacturing robotics. That surgery I have is going to be done by robots. My doctor's going to be sitting at a computer. He's going to be sitting at a computer. He's not going to be over my body. He's going to be sitting at a computer, looking at what's going on the computer, taking out my prostate with about 8 little fingers that are going in there to be able to do that. And I think if you look at how they make cars and things with the advent of all these manufacturing robots, that in reality, the working middle class in America could realistically, in a very short period of time, I'm not a prognosticator, don't want to be one, but I mean in a very short period of time, the working middle class could realistically vanish as we progress further and further into socialism, where jobs just aren't there. And whenever it actually happens, listen, when those things begin to happen, this thing we call the mark of the beast, or the Bible calls the mark of the beast, is going to be something that is going to be widely and quickly accepted. I think when that comes out, everybody's going to say, yeah, we'd love to do that. People are asking, I've had people ask me questions, well, do you think all this vaccine does have anything to do with the mark of the beast? Absolutely not. If you get a vaccine, you haven't taken the mark of the beast just because it may do something to your DNA or whatever it may be. They don't actually give you the virus, right? They give you something that tells your body to reject it. And so, no, that's not the mark of the beast. You won't get the mark of the beast. Why? Somebody tell me why you're not going to get the mark of the beast. You're not going to be here. Hallelujah. That's the good part. It's something to smile about. So, without me going into a lot of detail about this sign, I think it should be obvious that the world as a whole is on the verge of some kind of financial global collapse, or at least some kind of financial readjustment. I don't know what that would be. I don't know how they would go about doing all of that. Just some kind of monetary readjustment. So, listen, there's a debate going on every day about what's going to be recognized as the world currency. Right now it's the U.S. dollar. China wants it to be whatever they call it. I don't know. Y'all might know. Quiet. I don't know what it is, but it's all up for debate. And digital money, that's what they call it. They call it digital money. Electronic money, which is the way that, I'm sure there are plenty of you that just pay everything online, right? You don't even write a check. You just pay online for whatever you buy, or you give them a credit card when you go into the grocery store. There's no money. I don't take out my wallet and give somebody $150, to buy some groceries. Just give them my MasterCard or my Visa card or my American Express card or whatever card I've got, right? Just give it to them. And then we pay it off at the end of the month. And so digital money may soon become the only form of money that's available. You got to think about this for a minute. This is a very important realization that I think helps us appreciate what may happen here in these last days.
It's almost like that in China already. They would get mad if we would pay in cash. And little mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
You go with cash, they want WeChat. WeChat, you can pay with WeChat. Yeah, even in China it's happening.
Well, I think China would be a place where this would happen very quickly because they have such a large population and such a large economy that they have to control. In a smaller country, I don't think it would be quite as critical. So if all of this becomes, everybody listen carefully, if all of this becomes a reality, where we eventually cross over into the digital money and things like cash, I always say, well, cash is just as good as money. There's going to be a time when it's not. When cash is not even going to be something that you utilize. If there's ever, then if that happens, then the issue becomes, everybody listen, the issue ultimately is going to become what kind of system is going to have to be in place to transfer those monies from one person to a vendor, from a vendor to a manufacturer, to however it is. How is all of that actually going to take place? And here's the terms that I think that you ought to appreciate. It's going to be done digitally, it's going to be done invisibly, and it's going to be done seamlessly. Right? It's just going to be done digitally. It's going to be done invisibly so that you don't see it, and it's going to be seamless. It's going to be across all your accounts, whatever they be, wherever you shop, whatever bank you use. There may not even be any banks in a sense, in the same way that we think about it. I was reading this week. This is incredible. You ought to go out for yourself and do it. You ought to go out and you ought to type in the World Economic Forum. There are 3 organizations that it'd probably be worth your time to do a little bit of research. One's called the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the WEF, which is the World Economic Forum, and the other one is, I'm drawing a blank, I'll think of it in a minute, and I'll tell you. But I went out and I did some research on the World Economic Forum, and I want to give you some of they gave some predictions for the year 2030. Now you have to understand who the World Economic Forum is. They are elitist. They are some of the world's richest people on the planet, the Bill Gates of the world, that are part of the World Economic Forum. And its first statement said that by 1930, listen to this, it said, you will no longer own anything, but you will be happy. In other words, what they're saying there, what they're saying there is that private property ownership is going to be abolished in some way. Now, whether or not that's going to happen on a global scale, or whether it's going to happen in Windsor, where I live, and our land has been in our family for 6 generations. I don't know how somebody's just going to come in 10 years and take away all of that property. It's the idea, right? It's the idea that's in place, that they're implanting, that these global elitists are planning for you.
They've already done it, Gary. You have property tax.
Yeah, I know. You can't own anything.
You can't own land anymore.
You don't own anything. If you don't pay your taxes, they'll come take it. So it's that way with anything, your cars and your homes. And
Bill Gates is the largest owner of farmland in America right now.
Yeah.
I just read that this week.
Well, and then I read that if you want to go shopping, that you won't buy anything, you'll rent everything, and then what you rent will be delivered to you by drones. Now I don't know how they're going to take two buggies of groceries and deliver it by a drone, but this is what the global elitists are thinking. This is what they are trying. What they're saying is that there's going to come a whole reset, and that's the word that they actually use. I'll give it to you in a minute. They said that after the pandemic, that we must not slip back into the old ways of doing business. They said that COVID-19, I don't have a clue what they meant by this. I read on it. They said that the COVID-19 has revitalized the social contract. In other words, it's like what the COVID-19 has done is that it's sort of taken the white Caucasians and the African Americans and sort of balanced everything out, I think is part of what they're saying. And how we deal with things, you know, on a global basis. And so here's what they said their goal was. Everybody listen. These are people that are making decisions that are going to impact you and your families in the very near future. That's what they said. Their goal is to control and reshape what they call mindsets and agendas. In other words, they want to control how you think. So where do you think that they decided that they were going to start to do that? Somebody tell me. Where do you think that they decided that they were going to start to implement changing the mindsets and agendas?
Kindergarten.
That's right. The young kids, the schools, what'd you say, John?
Social media too.
Social media.
Congregating churches for the first part of the COVID process.
Well, the point is that they know that for you, for somebody like me that's 73, that I'm not their target audience because they don't want me around. People like Henry Kissinger said we need to get rid of 50% of the world's population. Some of them have said that we need to, some of these people in this say that we need to get rid of 90% of the population. And there are ways to do that with epidemic. Bill Gates has said that. He's one of the 10% guys. And so, and then they said, and what we want to do is to create what they refer to as historic shifts. This is the term that they gave it. They call it the Great Reset Initiative. The Great Reset Initiative. They want to reset life. They want to reset every part of life, and they have the elitists in the world. I'm going to read you something that they said here. And they're starting in managing the direct consequences of COVID in managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. I'm going to read a direct quote from you. Everybody listen very carefully. Words manipulate people, right? These words sound kind of noble when you first listen to them. These are people that want to control your life, right? This is what they said. This was one of their main primary statement. As we enter a unique window of opportunity, they're talking about COVID, to shape the recovery, this initiative will offer, the Great Reset Initiative, will offer insights to help inform all those, listen to this, all those determining the future state of global relations. I'll come back to that phrase. The direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, certainly not going to be church, religion, the nature of business models, and the management of a global commons. Drawing from the vision and vast expertise of the leaders. Who is that? Engaged across the forum's communities, those that are in our forum, the Great Reset Initiative has a set of dimensions to build a new social contract that honors the dignity of every human being. That's just baloney. I mean, it all sounds kind of noble. This is probably a reset for what is often called the New World Order. Right? This is it. This is the language that they're using to create a new world global community, right? That we've all been hearing about for years and years. You know, the language seems commendable. It's very articulate. It's sort of alluring and appealing. We've got all these great things that are going to take place. But it's the hidden agenda that's really in play here. And I think the question is, who are all of those that are determining the future state? Or the second one, where it says here, are the vision and the vast expertise of the leaders. Who is that? Is it you and me? Is it anybody from Chimeville? I assure you that we won't be asked to be on that committee. It's not. And it says that they're going to reset the direction of national economies, which is your money, by the way.
And your savings.
Right. They're going to reset that. They're going to even the playing ground for everybody. So it's the incredibly wealthy. It's the extreme elitists that are making decisions for the rest of us. What they call this vast expertise of leaders. These people that have money will never be impacted, affected. They're going to, this is, I said that you no longer own anything. You'll be happy. They said you won't eat red meat anymore. Or it'll just be like a dessert that you have every once in a while. They're going to control the food that you have. They said that you won't eat as much as you do now. And so I think what's happening in this kind of initiative is trying to move the world from what they call, this is the way this is the terms that they use, we're moving the world from crisis to consolidation. We're moving the world from crisis to consolidation. So we're going to be like a one world. We're all going to be in agreement. We're going to be one big happy family. We're not going to have many distinctions, economic, racial, whatever it may be. And the way that they are going to ultimately do this is that they're going to reset, they're going to do this reset, the financial system as a way of accomplishing this initiative.
Order from chaos.
That's right. That's exactly one of their models and mottos of what they are really trying to do. We're going to create chaos so that we can create the change that we want. We're going to do that. Listen, the rich man is going to get wealthier, and the poor and the average guy is going to get poorer. That's part of the reset. Now, in preparation for what's called the mark of the beast, for some people it may seem like science fiction, but the idea of implanting what we would call wearable things that you can have implanted into you, wearable electronics that are either on you or under your skin, is already a reality. Larry, do you have something in your
I have lots of things in me.
Yeah, I mean, you got something up here that you put down, and it monitors everything, sends that information to your doctor, whatever it is. A lot of heart transplant people have that.
They've had pacemakers for years. Parkinson's patients have electronic thing in their brain.
Right. There's all kinds of implants that are already in existence that give information, and that technologically information can be transferred about how somebody is, what they're doing.
We put chips in our pets.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about that because that's where it actually has begun. And I don't see anything wrong with the doctors being able to monitor your health, especially if you're in a case like Larry, or if you're a heart transplant. Dr. Steve Sullivan, before he died, he had one of those things in his heart. He had some heart surgery and had an implant, and it just automatically sent information to his doctor on a daily basis without him having to do anything. He may have had to push a button or something. In banking, this is in the financial realm. This is called digital tattoos, and it would become what they call a foolproof digital wallet. Now I know. Listen, everybody, listen to me. I want to teach out of this, right? I'm much more comfortable in 1 Peter. When I'm doing word studies and I'm analyzing a book, right? But if I'm going to contextualize the shadow, I have to talk about things that are happening and how they can integrate in with the prophecies that we're looking at. So if somebody had what I would call a digital, financial tattoo that was embedded in them with some kind of barcode or chip, it would give a new meaning to paying in person, right? Where you'd have to be there to be able to do that. And so I think the advantages of all of this is it makes cash and it makes credit cards obsolete. So nobody can steal your money physically. They can steal it digitally. We do that all the time. I mean, we have people all the time, Amazon has rejected your payment or something, and you just click here and give us the updated information and we'll rob your money, we'll rob your account or something. So, the only way this is going to happen if they can determine that what is embedded into the individual is a technology that is non-threatening to the individual, right? You're not going to get sick, you're not going to die, you're not going to get cancer, all those kind of things that go on. The obvious downside, everybody listen, the obvious downside to all of this is that if the government does not like what you are doing, and that there is no currency, it's not even in existence, that all the government has to do to control everything about your life is to cut off your digital account. They'll just cut it off so that you can't buy. That's what we're reading here in Revelation 13. Unless you have this, you cannot buy or sell except that you have this mark, whatever that mark is. When John wrote it, they didn't have computers. They didn't have digital tattoos. They didn't have anything like we have today. So obviously, it was a mark of some kind for him when he saw that and how God revealed it to him. But if you don't do what they want you to do, they'll cut off your digital account so that you cannot buy or sell anything until you comply with all their demands and their regulations. Let me give you a practical example. Okay, let me just give you a practical example. Let's say that a digital system was in place. Some kind of digital system was in place. We didn't use cash anymore. And the government decided that it wanted to take all of your guns. It wanted to confiscate guns. You may not have any guns, but let's just say that's what they wanted to do. People are buying more guns every month than the United States Armed Forces have altogether. That's how distressed people are about what's going on. Well, all the government would have to do at that point is just if they decide to confiscate weapons and you don't want to play by their rules, they just cut off your digital account. It'd be what I'd call legal blackmail, right? It'd be institutionalized blackmail at a level so they can get you to do whatever they want you to do. Right now, you can go and do whatever you want to. You can buy whatever you want to do. You'd be at the mercy of the ideas of anyone in power at the time. And if their ideologies conflicted with yours, if their ideologies conflicted with your spiritual convictions, they would be able to easily control you by just cutting off what you buy or sell. Now, isn't that what's going to happen right here? Isn't that exactly what Revelation 13 seems to imply is going to happen there? The Antichrist who wants to be worshipped as God, and people get saved and say, we're not going to worship you. And he said, what? You can't buy or sell anything.
So Gary, are you correlating the tribulation in Daniel and Matthew, Revelation 13, with what you are talking about when you're referring to 2030?
No.
Being a free thing.
No. Jesus might not come back until 3030, for all I know. What I'm saying, though, is that the technology is in place. That's all I'm saying. The technology is in place for the mark of the beast.
So 2030,
that
technology is starting to be in place.
I'm just saying the technology is casting a shadow across us.
Credit cards is when it began to become possible. It's just a natural migration from cash to credit cards to a fully digital economy.
Right. I'm not a prognosticator, and I'm not going to try to be. I'm just telling you what other people in the world that have more influence than I do are saying is going to happen.
Credit cards started in the 70s with a diner's card.
This is not make-believe anymore. This is biblical. So if you take a deteriorating global economy or economic system and you already have the technological advancements in place, which they are, you sort of connect the dots. We're not very far away from what we're talking about here, that people are readily going to accept the mark of the beast. You know, I've thought about this. I'm not, and once again, I'm not a prognosticator, and I'm not trying to be here. I want you to appreciate that. You can make up your own decisions about this. But I think a lot of the technology is already going to be in place and already going to be implemented. And the mark of the beast could easily be something where it's just another digital layer that's applied to what has already been embedded into somebody.
The groundwork's already being.
It's already there. It's already in place. And he sets himself up and is able to do all of that. It's the methodology of controlling the masses. It's what the World Economic Forum wants to do. They want to have a reset for global economies and global marketplaces. They call it the global green space. It goes on and on and on. It never seems to end. If you look back there in Revelation chapter 13, it says very clearly in verse 17 that you can't buy or sell unless that you have this mark embedded somewhere on your body, on your hand or on your forehead. Now, the good part for me is that this thing we call the mark of the beast. I have plenty of people that ask me all the time about, do you think that we're going to have the mark of the beast? And not while I'm here. Okay, not while I'm here. That's just my feeling about it. You may feel differently. I'm going to leave before the mark of the beast ever actually comes into play. That ought to be an encouragement to you. It's an encouragement to me. But I am saying I think I'm willing to project that the technology for that is already going to be in place as we sort of maneuver around global collapses in the economies and all of that kind of stuff. So it may not be implemented on a global scale, but certainly there's going to be some implementation that's going to make it easier. This stuff is obviously under development already. And then to make it even more believable, it's a well-established fact that the technology is already in place to use what they call microchip tattoos. Microchip tattoos, they often call it electronic tattoos, and an electric microchip tattoo, an electronic or microchip tattoo, is a tattoo that is currently being used to track animals. You had mentioned that earlier, Larry. And they do that with deer. They do it with wild animals. They put it on dogs. You know, you can get a little RFID thing in their ear, where you get it. You may have a dog like that, and you put the little chip in the ear. If he gets lost, you can find him. You know, my son came up today. Is Tristan's birthday, so we got to go to his birthday party after church. And you know, Benjamin was coming home, and I just got on my phone. I picked it up, and I got a place, Find Friends, and I clicked his name. It told me exactly where he was. He was at CVS in Orangeburg on the way home. He parked in the CVS parking lot, and I knew exactly where he was, and that's exactly what these microchips are doing. And ultimately, they're going to be. It won't be probably communicate this way, but it's going to be used to monitor you, to monitor people. They use our phones now to monitor us. If you have an iPhone or maybe some other kind of phones, and you're sitting around at the table one night and you're talking about buying some gloves for your grandchildren or something like that, it won't be 5 minutes, and if you go on one of the sites, the advertisement's going to come up. It's going to be gloves for children. They can listen to what you're saying in your bedroom at night. I'm serious. This happens almost every day. If I looked up something the other day on a place called Mobstud, where you buy just little things, and it was a kind of a merce, they call it, a man's thing, you know, where you put your phone in a little book, or, you know, stuff in it, not a big thing that you could carry when you travel. And I just looked it up, bought one. Next thing I know, I've got every website I go to has got Mobstud. I'm looking at the World Economic Forum, Mobstud. And if I went and looked at anything, it doesn't matter what I looked at. I bought for my wife for Christmas and my daughter before Christmas, I bought one of those things where they cut it out of metal and it's got your name and it's got F and then got Fleetwood, you know, you probably saw it on Facebook. And I only saw one, and so I went to this place. It was called something design, and I went and I bought it. And the next thing I know, I mean, this was within about 5 or 10 minutes after I had bought it. I went back on Facebook, and I was just kind of scrolling through it, and then there must have been 5 other companies of that did the same thing, so I could buy it from any one of them. Big Brother's watching us, right? They're going to track your finances, your personal information, your vaccine, your health records. It's not beyond reason. I don't think it's beyond reason to think that ultimately that vaccines will become the new standard of control. Right? That you can't get a job unless you've been vaccinated with the vaccine. We know that's happening in the health area. I can't travel unless I've been vaccinated, and if I was somewhere, I gotta get vaccinated or gotta take the test. I gotta be quarantined for so long. Some countries have already adopted and are currently implementing what they call a COVID-19 passport. In other words, you got to have a COVID-19 passport that says that you've been inoculated, that you've been vaccinated, before they'll let you into their country or on a plane from their country. The microchips that we're talking about here, these microchip tattoos, they have a barcode inside of them already. That's what is there. And it can be scanned just like a tag on any item that you buy in a grocery store. I have this is a hard drive out of my computer. Got a barcode on it, right? Just $229, whatever it costs. I mean, you can buy it. That's the way it's going. The system is going to work. So everything about you and me will be able to be tracked. It'll be able to be cataloged, and it can be used by people any way that they want it to be. Everything today gets stored in the cloud, right? Everything about you is in the cloud. Every site you've ever been to on the internet is there. Ed came and replaced my hard drive recently on my computer. I'm not going to get to the second part, so I'll bring this next week. And everything I've ever done on my computer, it was there. Right, Ed? I can't lose it. It may be corrupted, but it's there in some form or another. Even if I deleted it, put it in trash, said I want to get rid of you forever, it's still there. You go out to a wrong site, I'm sorry, but somebody knows that you're there. And if ultimately they don't like you and they want to bring that back up, they'll put that in your face. Not everything I'm describing is in and of itself a bad thing. It's good for people to have some information, right? I don't care if the bank knows where I live, you know, or when I go to my doctor that he's got the supplements that I take on a regular basis. That's not a bad thing, but it's just a precursor for the fulfillment of a last days, end times prophecy. That's all I'm saying. 100 years ago, we didn't have this. Couldn't talk about it. It might have been a pipe dream, but the technology wasn't there. You'll really be interested when we get to next week and we talk about out of Ezekiel about Daniel closing up the prophecy and people running to and fro and the increase in knowledge. You'll be really interested about all of that. It's probably not what you think it's going to be. The current microchips, this is just a side note, that's used in animals lead to increased incidences of cancer in the animals. They have now, with all this 5G stuff that's coming out, I'm not trying to, I know I'm not teaching out the Bible, so just forgive me.
Can you repeat that?
Repeat what?
About the animals.
That they have microchips in them to track them, but it leads to increased incidences of cancer. And with all this stuff about 5G and even 3G and the electromagnetic waves that are in the atmosphere and what it's causing to people, now they have things you can put on your body to monitor that, and you can put it on your computer, you can put it on your phone, you got little stickers you can put on there to eliminate that sort of electromagnetic field around you because of the negative impact of it. So if the technology is there, it won't be long before the governments are going to be willing to utilize it in a way that they deem is best for you and for them. And if you resist it, what they're going to do is that you're going to be denied access to food, to gasoline, to health care, to medicine, to any other item that's necessary to live. It's all about control, right? It's all about control. Now, I'm going to conclude there. This is why people get up and leave. I'm going to conclude the technical side of that, and I want to give you the spiritual side of it, right? And then I'll close. I want to make a couple of spiritual observations that really impact all of us. I want you to listen very carefully. I only have two. The first is that no matter what man wants to create as some kind of new world order, I don't care what it is, whether it is Nimrod and whatever he wanted to do and build a ziggurat up to heaven, or whatever kind of name that they may want to give to it, the new world order, the ultimate and final new world order will be the one that has been sovereignly ordained by God. And nothing's going to stop that from happening. I'm not worried about being a part of the new world order because I'm not going to be here. And God's going to destroy it. Whatever it is that they're creating, God is going to destroy it. I want you to go to Revelation chapter 20. The first aspect of this is what's known as the millennium. And it's described here in Revelation chapter 20, verse 4 through 6. Now, based on whether you're an amillennialist, postmillennialist, premillennialist, whatever you are, creators, it doesn't really matter how you interpret the term 1,000 years. The people that don't take it literally just say it's just a long period of time. I'll leave that up to you today. I interpret it as 1,000 years. It says in verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. These are people that are coming out of the tribulation. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. That's when they get brought up, right? We've got all this here. They get brought up. They go to the great white throne judgment. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. The simple fact is that whatever the new world order wants to be, it's going to be destroyed in this period of time, and God is going to implement his new world order in the millennium. Let him go ahead. It's okay. Not something I feel like I got to fight, got to resist. I don't feel afraid of it. On my theology, I'm not going to be here. If you want to hang around to the midpoint or to the end, that's okay. You know, I'm being facetious. I'm not trying to be ugly. They're legitimate believers that believe that. The second aspect is in Revelation chapter 21. It's called a new heavens and a new earth. I want to read verse 1 through 4. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. We got that over here, right? Got a new heaven, got a new earth, a new Jerusalem. City comes down 1,500 miles square. It gives a description of it here. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. They shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Whatever the New World Order can offer you, it's nothing like this. This is God's New World Order. The millennium, the new heavens, and the new earth. Obviously, there's a lot more detail related to both of these, but the primary biblical information about this doesn't come from Revelation. Doesn't even really come from the New Testament. It comes from the Old Testament. I'll give you the books real quick. I'll talk fast. I'll put the notes on the website if you're interested. There's Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Joel, Amos, Micah, and Zechariah. Those are the key books that talk about those two aspects of God's New World Order. And so I want to say it to you this way. This world's not my home. It's not your home. I live in Windsor, but this is not my home. I know that. I know that this is not my home. And Hebrews 11:10 says that we are looking, he's talking about Abraham, says that we are looking for that city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. That's the home that I'm looking for. That's the one that you're looking for. Titus 2:13 says, looking for the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God. Right here. I'm going to see him here. I think when he wrote it, he's talking about this glorious appearing of Jesus when he comes. It's going to be unbelievable. Listen to how Hebrews 11, verse 13 through 16 says it. Talking about the Old Testament saints. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. So no matter what kind of condition that this world is in, wherever it gets to, all the elitists and the wealthy of the world, decisions that they make, and no matter how much unrest and how much turmoil actually surround us in the day and age in which you and I live, this is not the place that God wants me to put my affections on. It's not the place where he wants me to consider to be my home. I'm not putting my hope in the government. I'm not putting my hope in the government or anything else other than the Word of God. And any kind of sort of global utopia that the elitists think that they can create on the earth is no more than a pipe dream. Anybody who thinks that they can create a global utopia without God is a fool. And whatever it is that they might promise to somebody, whatever they create without God eventually becomes a living hell. A living hell. Whatever it is that man thinks he can do without God becomes a living hell. Everybody will be a prisoner. Everybody will be a prisoner in this new world order. And then lastly, and this is simply an encouragement to each of us relative to what I consider to be the near-term future because of all of the events, the unrest, the tension that surrounds us nationally and politically. Hopefully, over the years, I have taught you well regarding the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. And hopefully by this point in this church at this time that you personally are convinced of the sovereignty of God over all things. Over spiritual principalities and powers, over kings and kingdoms and nations and rulers, and over COVID-19, over anything else, over anything and everything else that may in some way try to impact and confront your life. My encouragement to you is simple. Listen very carefully. We're going to get a chance, right? We're going to get a chance to find out who really believes in the sovereignty of God. Whether you believe in the sovereignty of God, whether James and Cindy believe in it, where Larry Lowe believes in it, whether Tim Blank believes in it, we're going to get an opportunity to determine whether or not me and Brenda really believe in the sovereignty of God in these last days. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to either spend our time in all of our days complaining against the outworking of the sovereignty of God in these last days. We're going to complain about the president. We're going to complain. I'm going to give you a verse here in a minute you're going to have to take home and read and meditate on. We're going to complain about the government, what they don't do. We're going to lose this. We're going to lose our 5013C. This is going to happen. We're going to make all of these complaints about. And what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be arguing against and complaining against the sovereignty of God over all things. Or we can bow our knees to his sovereignty. We can seek his face and submit to that sovereignty and be conformed more and more and more to the image of Jesus Christ. I prayed last night, may God in heaven, may Christ at the throne, and may the Spirit of God who indwells you, who lives inside of you, give you the grace to be and to live exactly how he wants you to live in these last days. It may not be pleasant, so be it. It may not be pleasant. If it gets worse, listen, if you study the scriptures, I think that when we went through 1 Peter, I made the point, I kept making the point. It talks more about persecution than any other book in the New Testament or any other book in the Bible. You and I are not exempt from persecution. The Bible is very clear that any man who desires to live godly in Christ will suffer persecution. Our day may be coming quicker than we had anticipated. But if it gets worse, if things don't go the way that we want them to, I don't want to ever forget how powerful, how glorious, how sovereign my God is. I want you to turn to Romans chapter 13. I'm going to leave with this and you can go home. This is why people don't come to Chinville, right? Because I've been teaching for an hour and 18 minutes. Romans chapter 13, I'm going to read. This is a great passage. Y'all go home and study on verses 1 through 6. I'm going to read verses 1 through 2. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. You know, I figured out a long time ago that when God wants to judge a nation, he gives them bad leaders. He sets them up. No wonder whoever won the election. And off they go with every kind of, on first day in office, signing 20 different things. You know, I sat there and watched them just sign all these things off. None of them in your favor. Therefore, whoever, that's me, Brenda, that's Casey, Eric, that's Larry, Bonnie, that's John, Annette, Tammy, Andy, everybody here, Whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. This is the Word of God. I am not making this up. Either I believe in the sovereignty of God over all things that He sets up, He appoints those that are in authority, or I don't. And if I believe that He does, I want to yield my life to that. Right? I want to yield my life to that. I'm going to say, hey, God, you're sovereign. If it costs me my life, so be it. If it costs you your life, so be it.
But there are times the authorities go against the word of God.
I know. That's, you still have got to not let this get out of your sight.
I never did like that passage.
All right, any questions?